This nation was founded on the principle that all men are created equal.
We hold these truths to be self-evident.
That all men
are
created equal.
I'll tell you what freedom is to me. No fear. I mean, really, no fear.
Created equal.
This is Created Equal from WDET in Detroit. I'm Stephen Henderson, and with me here in the studio is the show's producer, Carrie Jr. II. Hey, Carrie.
Good morning, Stephen.
Yeah, so we're just a few days
Yes.
from Mother's Day. Are you ready, Carrie? Have you gotten what you're supposed to get in advance of this?
I did make a quick run to the grocery store yesterday to get a quick gift and a card, and yeah, I am prepared. I have to see what my mother's schedule is like to see if we can schedule a dinner. Do something a little bit more formal, but she's pretty low key. So,
are you gonna make dinner?
Oh, I haven't. I don't know if she'd like that. I don't know if she'd like me.
She wouldn't want you cooking.
No, I don't know about that. So maybe I'll have to take that into consideration. How about you?
I am prepared, but not as prepared as I should be. But that's kind of my general state of being these days. But my mom lives out of town. And so I don't get to see her on Mother's Day.
Oh, okay, yeah.
She is, however, coming to Detroit for the summer. She will be here for 9 weeks. And so I think part of my gift is getting everything ready for her arrival and her presence here for 9 weeks.
Get to soak it up
in
for
my
9
house,
weeks.
which will be great. It'll
Soaking
be
up your
really
mom.
interesting, right?
Soaking up your mom for 9 weeks, I'm sure, will be a treat for both you and her, because she was your mother. She parented you, so there's
Absolutely.
all the joys, and I'm sure some difficulties along with that as well. So
no, I always love when I get to spend time with her. She's 81. You never know how long you'll have your mother. So every chance I get to spend extended time with her really is a treat. We want to talk, of course, today on the show about not just Mother's Day, but about motherhood and about some of the challenges that mothers, all of our mothers, face right now, and how they look different, really, from things that they might have faced in the past.
yeah, I can't speak to it specifically or directly, but there's so much that's changed in what children have access to nowadays. So it'd be interesting to explore that. I'm not a parent, Stephen. I know you are a father, and parenthood, I'm sure, has its own challenges.
Sure.
But there's also a difference between the way that men and women approach parenting, right? Like both parents feel, and looking at a Pew Research Center study that I'm referencing here from 2022, both parents, men and women, feel the pressures of providing financially for their families, but women primarily feel that pressure of being also the caretaker and working while also parenting more so than men do. And so that imbalance is something I think we also want to highlight today too.
Yeah. We've got a great guest for the conversation today. Dr. Katheryn Maguire is a professor at Wayne State University, and her research focuses on work-life balance, long-distance relationships, and online communication. Social media, of course, is a confounding influence on all parenting right now, but especially for mothers. Dr. Maguire is also the mother of a 15-year-old, so she is well suited to have this conversation, even from a personal perspective.
Right. I got to get out the way.
Yeah. Dr. Katheryn Maguire, welcome to Created Equal.
Thank you so much. This is a pleasure to be here today.
Yeah. So I'm going to start with the same question I just asked Carrie Jr., our producer. What are you planning for Mother's Day this week?
Well, part of it is the recognition and thinking about my own mother, who passed in 2001.
Oh, no.
So she would have been 79, and I miss her every day. The lessons she taught me live on in me and my heart, and I pass what I can on to my 15-year-old. And so I'll be interested to see what they're planning for me on this Mother's Day weekend.
Sometimes it's a surprise, right?
We went shopping the other day, and we both bought stuffed animals, and that was part of my present.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. So I want to talk about not just the challenges actually of motherhood. We can talk a little about the joy of motherhood as well this hour. And again, listeners, we want to hear from you, especially during this conversation. Call us and let us know if you are a mother, what motherhood looks like right now, and some of the burdens of motherhood that maybe look different than they did 4 or 5 or even 10 or 15 years ago. Also, give us a call and let us know about your mother. What things do you remember about how your mother parented you, how your mother parents you now, if you still have your mother with you. Even as adults, of course, we have that primary relationship, and it has a huge effect on our lives. 313-577-1019 is the number here on the phones. That's 313-577-1019. You can also go to Twitter and #CreatedEqual or @WDET, and we can include you that way. We are also going to hear from some other mothers during the show today. So, Dr. Maguire, let's talk about the 2020s, which seemed like a very different time to be a parent, but much different, really, to be a mother. I want to start with COVID and the disruption to all of our lives that it represented, but the disruption to work and how that changed the burden on mothers.
Yeah, we are in the middle of analyzing data that we got very lucky to collect during COVID-19. I'm with a team of researchers at Wayne State, led by the amazing Krista Brumley, who's a sociologist, as well as Boris Baltas and Shirin Montaser. And we were kind of looking at what did COVID-19 do for dual income couples? How did that change things, particularly when you had such, just like you said, disruption, when work is in the house? And how did that affect particularly parents? And even though we're in the middle of analysis, it was difficult for parents in particular. Particularly those who have neurodivergent kids as well. So, parents became like, when the schools shut down, their kids, they had to help with the education. But then you have that overlay of those who had IEPs and those who had, plans, and the parent had to somehow figure that out as well. So it was a significant challenge, to say the least.
Yeah. And it's a challenge that didn't go away necessarily when the world went back to normal, or whatever normal, I guess, means right now. Certainly, we're not doing the things that we were doing during COVID, but life does still look different.
Yeah, and I think there were gifts from COVID, too. One of the things that we found in our interview data is that we asked kind of like, how do you think about COVID? Like, if you had a metaphor or a figure of speech to describe your COVID experience, what would it be? And so many, in the second time we talked to them, really started focusing on the benefits. And it was that quality time, like that spending time together. It wasn't the gifts, it wasn't all that. It was, being able to take those walks and find fun ways to connect. And I think that's the gift of COVID that we hope will pay forward, is recognizing that time together, even though it was stressful and it was difficult, and managing so many different roles and hats, you got to spend time with each other in a way that you hadn't really before.
Yeah. So what are the changes that seem to have, I guess, stuck from the pandemic and the difference in parenting, and which ones are kind of behind us now?
Well, I think social media, was talked about earlier, is a theme from both the parents and the kids' perspective. One of the things I was thinking about is, like, where did I learn about parenting the most? Mm-hmm. And even though I had this PhD, I'm like, oh, I have all this research. I study family communication. I got this. I didn't, right?
You never quite do.
You
until
never
you
do.
Actually are a parent, right?
And so the greatest teacher for me on being a parent was actually my kid. And letting go of these expectations. And I think that's one thing that COVID did for us, is forced us to let go of a lot of expectations. This is how things should be. This is what I should be doing, what I need to be doing. But unfortunately, as we're emerging and workplaces are readjusting, we're beginning now hearing about, flexible work arrangements. Maybe we don't need those anymore. Maybe you need to come back to the office. And that need to is coming back in on some of the things that seem to actually be working.
Yeah. It seems like some of what we learned during the pandemic was about how flexible and how resilient our kids can be. And I don't want to overstate that, because I think there are certainly things about the pandemic that did great damage to our kids. And we, of course, need to be aware of that and trying to mitigate it. But that acceptance of the idea that perfection is impossible, and that it's okay that perfection is impossible. Our kids actually don't expect that things will be perfect, and they'll adapt. I think that's an important parenting lesson out of the pandemic as well.
Absolutely. So much change. It was an interventional moment. I mean, everything that we thought, all the things that we had come to expect and want in life just stopped. Parents expected other people to care for their kids, and for a lot of them, that now became everyone's responsibility in the home. It really started people thinking about how, as an individualistic culture, like, you are you and you're on your own and you have to take care of your family, like this intense motherhood, right? You have to do it all. You have to sacrifice yourself for the good of your kids. And then we had this pandemic, and that just disrupted everything. So the question is, as we continue emerging, how can we as parents learn from the resilience of our kids and see that and give some of those lessons back to us? Because you're absolutely right. They are emerging, and they're different. As an educator, we got to think of education completely differently than we did for the kids coming out of the pandemic. But they're smart, and they're resilient. And with social media, as long as you could teach them media literacy to know good information from, problematic, they're researchers almost inherently now.
Yeah. They think about information in really different ways.
Very different.
Than we did as kids, or even as we do as adults. I want to get going on the phones and on social here on Created Equal. And remember, you can join the conversation here. Tell us about your mom. Tell us about your parenting if you are a mom. Tell us about the challenges of parenting right now. Tell us about the unexpected joys, maybe, of motherhood. Also, give us a sense of the things that you learned from your mother and maybe continue to learn if you still have your mother in your life. 313-577-1019 is the number here on the phones. That's 313-577-1019. You can also go to social. Go to Twitter, #CreatedEqual or @WDET. We're going to start today with Jennifer in Detroit. Jennifer, welcome to Created Equal.
Thank you, Stephen. Welcome to your guest. I want to say I just love you. I love your show.
Well,
I'm thankful that we have you.
Oh, that's
I'm
very sweet.
64. And I'm on my way, actually, as we speak, to see my mother in Warren, who is battling that insidious disease of Alzheimer's. I told your producer that, I've been gifted with a woman who was very smart. My father was an officer in the United States Army, and so we traveled a lot. She was always a gracious hostess, often had to, Wednesday night we find out at dinner that General so-and-so and his staff of 20 will be at the house 48 hours later. And it was always, fully laid out, china, the bar, everything. So she taught me a lot about graciousness. There were high expectations, but there was a lot of love, insistence on education. I did not have the luxury of a partner, but my daughter is now 30. I'm a grandmother of a 4.5 and 3-year-old, and I can see in my daughter the things that Mom taught me, and I'm thankful. And despite the disease, she still knows us.
Yeah.
So on this Mother's Day, it's not about a gift for her. The gift to me is that she knows me still, and I am ever thankful. I do pray for all those families who are dealing with the same thing, because there's a lot of us. And I'm thankful that I have such a good foundation. I don't think I could have done what I had to do as a a mom without a partner, because I won't call myself a single parent, because I had a community. I had, cousins, and even her father's people were always very loving and supportive. So, I was a parent without a partner. That's how I like to put it.
Yeah. But, that's a wonderful story, Jennifer. And it's amazing that you still have your mother at 90, and even though that she's battling Alzheimer's, she still knows you. That's really unusual, and it's a real gift. That instant recognition that Jennifer has of the things that her mom taught her and how she sees them in her kids. That is everything, right? That's what parenting is about, but especially motherhood.
Oh yeah, because we talk about it as being a journey, but it's also gifts that you've received, gifts that you pass down. And I think, Jennifer's point is also a really good one, that when we become, in our case, daughters, we are daughtering. Mm-hmm. We are then becoming the caretakers of our parents. And that switch is a tough one.
Yeah.
And it's a time that we can give that love and joy back to them and when they need it.
Yeah. It's one of the things I'm starting to think about when my mom comes this summer is, I'm a parent, and I'm also caring for her. That kind of strange sandwich situation that people talk about is more and more present as my mom gets older. It's a challenge, but it's also a gift, right? The fact that my kids still have their grandmother at that age and can pitch in now that they can drive or all these other things that young adults do. They can help their dad take care of his mom. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to continue this conversation about parenting and motherhood. We'll also want to continue to hear from you on the phones and on social. 313-577-1019 is the number. 313-577-1019. You can also go to Twitter, hashtag us, or at WDET. We're going to keep Dr. Katheryn Maguire here with us, and we're going to hear from some other mothers in a couple minutes as well. Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Created Equal. This is Created Equal from WDET in Detroit. I'm Stephen Henderson, and I'm really glad that you've joined us. We've got Dr. Katheryn Maguire with us today. She's a professor at Wayne State University, and her research focuses on work-life balance, long-distance relationships, and online communication. We are talking about those things in the context of motherhood, how those things affect motherhood, how they change the burdens of motherhood. Sunday is, of course, Mother's Day, when all of us think about our mothers and try to show our mothers how much we appreciate and love them. We want to hear from you during this conversation as well. Give us a call and let us know what your experience is as a parent in the 2020s. Are you able to achieve work-life balance in the wake of the pandemic, which changed all of those calculations for everybody? Also give us a sense of how you manage things like social media in your parenting. Of course, it has such a strong influence over our children. 313-577-1019 is the number here on the phones. That's 313-577-1019. And you can also go to Twitter, hashtag Detroit Today, hashtag Created Equal, or at WDT. That's actually the first time I've made that mistake, talking about Detroit Today, the show I hosted for 9 years here before we switched to Created Equal. It's because I'm thinking about my mom. I'm not paying attention to the show. All right, Dr. Maguire, let's talk about these long-distance relationships and the difficulty maintaining long-distance relationships, making them strong. as I said at the open, I have a long distance relationship with my mom, and it's been that way for many, many years now. I mean, I think the last time we lived full time in the same city is more than a decade ago. It is hard to keep all of that together. It's hard to see each other, but it's also hard when we're not seeing each other to make sure that the relationship maintains the same character and texture. This is a big part of your research.
Yeah. And this is where we, again, see the benefits of technology, even though there's something to be said for the handwritten letter. I want to give a shout out and a call out to the card and the handwritten letter. Those are actual gifts. You can pick up the phone, you can send a text, but when you take the time to sit and write out mindfully your thoughts and your feelings and your thankfulness for someone, that is something that they will treasure. Because when you're in a long distance relationship, what you miss is being able to touch and to hug, right? But that piece of paper, that card, becomes this kind of like, for that moment, it's a tangible reminder, like, wow, this smells like them. I could smell their perfume, or I could smell them, and this is their writing. And so even though technology is a good thing, as I said, if you want to do a gift to your parent or your mother, the person who mothered you, think about a handwritten letter or card, because that is an amazing gift.
Yeah.
But yeah, technology allows us to see each other, allows our parents who are afar to see our kids and follow them, which is kind of like, better for better or worse. The role of Facebook and some of those other social media platforms is to help people, keep track of families these days.
Yeah, yeah. When we think about that communication with family members long distance, the thing that concerns me as my mom gets older is that lack of visual cue and the lack of sort of tactile feedback, I guess, that you get when you're in the room with somebody communicating with them. And, she's in really good shape and her memory is in pretty good shape. But there are times when I feel that real disconnect. And I wonder if writing her a letter might feel more connective or even less in that way.
Well, and one of the things is when we are physically together with someone, we feel, one of the words is present, right? Like when you can see them, you can interact with them, touch them, you feel present with them. So the question is like, how can we feel that sense of presence with someone when we're not together? So yeah, the more kind of different cues you have coming in, can you see, can you hear, all of that, the more present it is. But we also know that when technology doesn't work, whether it's user error, and for some of our elders are still having a hard time, getting that camera in the right place if you're trying to do that, or to FaceTime, or just to even see the buttons on the phone, right? Things that we take for granted, make it really difficult with someone who, has issues they're doing with aging. And that all can kind of interfere with that connection, So those are things that, that's why sometimes that letter, that can come in the mail, it's there, and it's a tangible reminder. And as long as the mail gets there and their eyesight is good enough, then that can be that moment of kind of connection in a way. But you're right. It also, sometimes we hear people talk about a sense of loss after it's done. Because like you're in this, you might feel present, you're like talking, you're having a great, and then you're done and you're like, oh.
It's gone.
It's
right?
gone, and there's there's a sense of loss there.
Yeah, I this is kind of dated, but I remember in the 70s and 80s, sometimes you would send people tapes of a letter that you might write, right? You'd write something and then speak it into a tape recorder, send them the tape, and then they would have that voice along with the words, but they could control when they heard it, right? They could listen to it many times over, listen to different parts of it. I don't know what the equivalent of that would be in modern terms, right? No one No one records things on tapes and sends them through the mail anymore. But I suppose you could send a digital message over the internet that was your voice, and somebody could have that.
Yeah, and actually it's really cool what kind of technology is there to helping us maintain these long-distance relationships. I remember during the pandemic, it was like, how can we, if we can't have a party to celebrate a big, like a 50th birthday, right? Mm-hmm. What can we do instead? And, there's companies that make cards that will compile the video messages together and then send that, allow you to have that as a platform so someone can have these video compilations. You don't have to do it yourself, right? Yeah. There's technology to help with long distance caregiving too. That helps you, did your, parent get out of bed today? Did they take their medicine? Things that it's, again, if you're not living with them, if you're from afar, it's hard to know. But that's where technology can be beneficial is giving us some of that information we need to know how they're doing. Yeah.
Again, 313-577-1019 is the number here on the phones if you want to join the conversation. Talk about your mom. Talk about your parenting as we get closer to Mother's Day. Let's go back to the phones with Ann in White Lake. Ann, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Stephen and everybody. I was calling because during COVID, I have 3 grown children, and that had just very typical and some not so typical challenges. But my daughter has ended up working at home, and she had been through some very difficult personal times, and she was in her early 30s. And so she, during COVID, adopted a rescue dog. And she hit it off, and it was the answer until she realized that the dog was very sensitive to noises in her neighborhood. And my daughter's job involved working on the phone, doing conference calls, working with, different things. And she couldn't hear because the dog just barked. And there was a neighborhood park, and it was just hopeless. So she called one day, I think having a panic attack. Mom, what am I going to do? So, Mom to the rescue. And I drove down there, and you can guess the dog ended up
That's your dog now, right?
Yeah, my dog, my husband's, but we're dog lovers. And the fun part was that the dog ended up, we live in a quieter neighborhood and we're retired and all that. He ended up being an ambassador. I could take him for a walk, and neighbors would come out, they'd pet our dog, and he was so friendly. And, he was just, like I said, I call him the ambassador. So what happened was that part for the dog had a happy ending. And my daughter and I, who, I don't know, your guest might have comments about mother-daughter, but my sons were not a piece of cake, but it was mother-daughter was rocky. Well, my daughter's a very talented artist. And I like to I'm more a I just, for fun. Yeah. And so we wrote a book.
You wrote a book together about the dog.
And my daughter, with her art, she had, of course, a ton of photographs of the dog on her phone. She also does just beautiful and very simple illustrations. So she illustrated the book. I did kind of a really simple rhyming, text. Wow. Yeah. And we self-published this little book. And, we ordered like a boatload of copies. and just the other day, I texted my daughter how many, years after this, saying, how much did we pay for those books? Because I think we might. Every time I go somewhere, like totally random, run into somebody, end up telling them the story about our dog Drover, and that's another story. But
anyway. So working with your kids or working with your mom I find it a fascinating idea and exercise. I don't know how anybody pulls that off. I think these are such complicated relationships, and they are often very fraught. And the idea that you were able to, after having to adopt your daughter's dog, which is an event in and of itself, that you were able to sit and write a book with her about it, that's pretty remarkable. And I mean, I hear lots of the kind of stressors there that I think of when I think of parenthood in Anne's story.
Yeah, no, I love that story. And it's also a reminder, that, to be a mother and mothering's an action verb, right? It's an act, and you can mother creatures and people and communities, right? Regardless of, the gender you were assigned at birth or whatever role that you have in the world, mothering is still a thing. And those are fur children. Those animals really were helpful during COVID-19 and helpful for our mental health is a big way, because I think that's one of the things that as we emerge from the pandemic is dealing with issues about mental health and relationships and how those intersect, and that mother-daughter relationship can be fraught but also full of joy.
Yeah. And really appreciate the call and the great story. Let's go next to Cynthia in West Bloomfield. Cynthia, what's on your mind?
Well, I wanted to talk about the written word, and I discovered after my mother passed that she kept a diary. I didn't find the diary till after she passed.
Wow.
And she kept that diary for maybe 40 years or more. And, she always wrote things, and my kids, they would write letters back and forth, and she'd put $5 in an envelope or something and send it to them. And I found those letters in a stack. She kept everything.
My goodness.
And, now that written word, I can refer to that diary and just read it and, see things in it that, like I said, I never knew she even kept. And she would always tell me, I'm not going to be here forever, and to leave something behind. So even from her needlepoint, she would needlepoint and needlepoint pillowcases and make afghans. And I have those things, where I can touch them and see them, and remember my mother, or working in the garden.
So Cynthia, I'm curious about the diary, and you can tell me it's none of my business if you like, but I'm curious about some of the things you learned from a diary. I mean, diaries can be really personal, and sometimes there can be things in there that might upset other people. What did you find in your mom's?
Well, I found like in 1979 or somewhere when I was going to college, she wrote that, I don't have to worry when when I get older that my daughter will always take care of me, and I did. I was there for her, and, I have a son that suffers from schizophrenia, and I have to tell him, you have to learn to live on your own, that I'm not going to be here forever. And he lives in her house. So, you can't replace a mother and the things that they teach you.
Yeah.
And it's, but she was just big on writing things down.
Yeah, that's great.
I found slips of paper in her old clothes, and
it's like a little puzzle that you're kind of putting together with all these pieces that your mom left behind. Dr. Maguire, that's a fascinating story about memory and history and the tangible things that we want from our parents, but especially from our mothers, to remember when they're gone.
Absolutely. And I remember when my mother passed, she had actually written me a letter for me to read after she died.
Mm-hmm.
And it was amazing for me to have that gift. And it's something that I treasure to this day. And that's why, with social media, text and all that, those disappear. Well, some say they live forever, but they tend to, they're ephemeral, they leave. But that piece of paper, that diary, that book is going to be around. And I think that's a wonderful thing that she found. And I was wondering if the mom kind of had this in the back of her mind. I'm like, I'm going to write this down and for others to view, and maybe not just for herself.
Right. Yeah. Okay, we're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue this conversation about mothers and motherhood. Continue to hear from you, the listeners, on the phones and on social. 313-577-1019 is the number, and you can go to Twitter, #CreatedEqual, or @WDET. We'll be right back with more Created Equal. You're listening to Created Equal from WDET in Detroit. I'm Stephen Henderson, and I'm glad you've joined us. We're talking about motherhood and mothers in advance of Mother's Day. We've got Dr. Katheryn Maguire, professor at Wayne State University, whose research focuses on work-life balance, long-distance relationships, and online communication. She's with us in the studio. We want to hear from you as well. Give us a sense of how you think of motherhood in the 2020s. If you are a mother, if you still have your mother, what does that look like? What does that relationship look like? How has it been changed by some of the things that have happened to us over the last decade or so in our country and in the world? Do you think of it differently? Do you approach it differently? How do things like social media change the way you relate to your children? We want to hear from you on the phones. 313-577-1019 is the number, and you can also go to Twitter and #CreatedEqual or @WDET and be part of the conversation that way. Okay, Dr. Maguire, we asked a couple of your colleagues in the communications department here at Wayne State to tell us how social media is affecting their approach to parenting, and I want to talk about social media this segment. So I want to hear your response to the question about social media and how that's changed our parenting. But I want to start with their voicemails. The first is Elizabeth Stochev, who's a professor at Wayne State.
I'm Elizabeth Stochev, an associate professor of communication at Wayne State and also a mom. And you asked, how does social media affect my approach to parenting? And I will tell you that social media has had a big impact. I have been part of a generation that gave rise to social media, especially Facebook. And I've looked to my peers and content creators for advice about what to wear, to who to vote for. And so I think it's only natural that people of my generation are now looking to social media for our parenting choices. And what I have found is that there's a really wonderful community of early child educators, child psychologists, physicians, and social workers who can provide really wonderful insight about kids' development and how to parent successful, happy kids. It's honestly a resource that I couldn't imagine parenting without. But at the same time, social media are so heavily commercialized. They give me the ick now. They really operate on this model of data collection that they seem to have lost a lot of that feeling of organic togetherness that they were founded on. And that's just really evaporated. And I think that's really unfortunate because today's parents, especially moms, need a village more than ever. Most parents now work outside the home, which is in general a good thing. Research shows that working moms are generally happier, mostly for moms who work part-time in order to maintain a good work-life balance because it's so hard to do that while working full-time. And so I think this is why a lot of moms are continuing to turn to social media. They're looking for a sense of connection. They're looking for advice. They're looking to vent. All of these things that we once would have gotten from our physical community. And that's just part of the changing social fabric of our lives.
Wow, she had a lot to say there about all of that, about social media in particular. I want to have you respond to what Elizabeth Stoichev is talking about there.
Yeah, I think that community point is a really important one. Like I mentioned earlier, and I think one of the callers mentioned, having that community and having a village, right, to help with this. And now that village is oftentimes mediated. And so we turn to it. But it also kind of says that there's better and worse information out there. Knowing to look for the early childhood educators, things like that. That's where media literacy comes in, right? Being able to parse out the good and the better and the less, worse information, if you will. But that finding that community is critical. Being able to share and to vent. And, for me, it has been critical for me. Like one of the things that happened over COVID is a lot of people had pods. So it might be like one other family or two other families, and they would just come together, probably in a way they wouldn't have because of COVID. And they created their little village, right? And that's something that, again, I hope we carry forward and not just a mediated village, but an in-person one too, and recognizing that we cannot do everything. That's that intense motherhood myth. It's like you're expected to be excellent. You're expected to find balance. That word right there is loaded.
Yes.
Can you ever find balance? I don't know. I'm still looking for it myself.
Right. Again, 313-577-1019 is the number here on the phones. You can also go to social and leave a comment there. Okay, we have one more message to listen to from another of your colleagues, Dr. Maguire. This is Stephanie Tong, who's also a professor at Wayne State.
I'm Stephanie Tong. I am a professor of communication at Wayne State University, where I also direct the Social Media and Relational Technologies Smart Lab. How does social media affect my approach to parenting? As a social media scholar, one of the things I tend to think about is how what I post will affect my child. My kid's only 3, so he doesn't actually have the ability to consent if I post pictures of him or videos of him. And I wonder how that will affect his future, since he doesn't really have a say in what I post. But at the same time, I think about how that also allows me to keep in touch with my own mom, his grandma. And I think about that as a way to keep in touch, as a way to maintain our relationship with my own mom, who lives far away. So I think there's kind of a multifaceted kind of relationship that we have with technology, and it can both affect our children and affect ourselves and the relationships that we have with lots of different people. And I think about it as a mom, and I think about it as a daughter.
Yeah, again, that sandwich kind of position, and how there's a difference on each end of it. The idea of staying in touch with your mom, who's long distance, because you are on social media, because it's possible to do it in ways that you couldn't before, is really different from the fears you might have about your kids and what they're doing on and exposed to on social media.
Right. And I think that the point that Stephanie made about consent is really important too, because I mean, you look at what sometimes people will post of their little ones and you're like, wow, that was a lot of information and pictures that people usually didn't pull out till the graduation party of being naked in the bathtub, and they're posting it now. So it is kind of interesting how people are trying to figure out what are those boundaries and consent. Like before I came on today, I had to talk to my teenager and go, okay, kid, what are my boundaries? What are you comfortable with me? Because you made me the mom that I am. So what can I talk about, what I can't? So that issue of consent is actually, I think, a really important one. And how do we get involved and at the same time use technology to allow us to maintain those distance relationship with relatives and family from afar? And doing that is through pictures or videos. They want to see it, they want to hear it. But again, that's that balance.
Yeah, and it doesn't get any easier when your kids get older. I mean, when we dropped my son off at college 2 years ago, his sister, who's a year younger, came with us, of course, and helped move him into the dorm. And they're only 19 months apart. I knew that there was going to be a point in the day where they were just going to get really emotional with each other about the fact that they were not going to be living together anymore. And there was, that moment when we were going to leave, and my daughter just kind of broke down crying and was hugging her brother. And of course, I'm standing there taking pictures because I was like, I want to remember this. And I was put it on social media, and their mother said to me, you got to take that down because she's ugly crying in this picture and she's all emotional. She's not going to want people to see her that way. And I hadn't thought for a minute about the vulnerability of being a teenage girl and having something like that out there that your father put all over social media. But they see it differently than we do, and we've got to be able to see it more through their eyes, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And when they are faced with all the things, talk about parenting in a modern society. We live in a fraught society right now. And we used to be able to protect them from it by turning off the TV, then watching the news. They got it. They are getting it from many places, from social media, and so helping them manage that by not adding stress. Like I was reading something the other day. It was like, my job as a parent is to let them to be who they are and not do harm.
Yeah.
And the things that we think might be, oh, this is a great moment, this is beautiful, could be doing a harm. And it's a very visible harm that is not just between the two of you anymore. And, as I said, it makes us have to be much more mindful in just our approaches in our relationship with our kids and each other these days.
Yeah. The intentionality
absolutely
of it is really, really important. And the intentionality of trying to govern, I guess, how much of it they're exposed to and at what age. I think that's one of the things that's the most difficult, is deciding what's right and then also having any control at all over it once you open that door.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's, again, sometimes where you let your kid be the teacher. During the pandemic, my Katie and I would sit down next to each other and I go, hey, take me down. I don't know much about TikTok, so take me. And they took me through their thread. And I would see what things were being recommended and what they were watching. And we spent a couple hours looking at it together, and I learned from them what they did. And it built a trust between us. It's just like, okay, you trusted me enough to sit down and let me share this with you.
Yeah.
And so that has helped me be able to just kind of like, okay, what are they doing? What are they not doing? Right. But it's just, again, going to them and listening and not being the one to always talk down to, but let's say, hey, why don't you tell me what's going on? And being open to those conversations. Yeah. And I think that was a gift my mom gave me, was the importance of, that kind of just talking and connection.
Okay. Dr. Katheryn Maguire, professor at Wayne State University. It was really great to have you here for Created Equal. I hope you have a great Mother's Day, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. And I wish all the mothers and those who mother on a regular basis a happy Mother's Day.
Yes. Okay, Carrie, so you had about 50 minutes there to decide what you're doing on Sunday more than anything, right?
To decide what I'm going to cook for my mom or not.
Did you finalize your plans?
No, I didn't finalize my plans, but it did remind me of a plan I did have for my mother. You all were talking a lot about modes of communication, like social media, whether you're sharing it with the world, whether you're writing it down or recording it. And I was on a mission to record both my grandmother and my mother's voices, to have that kind of forever, because there's something very intimate about having their raw voices. And my maternal grandmother, well, both my grandmothers passed last year, but my maternal grandmother passed last year, but she left me a voicemail last year at some time that I just kept because I knew it was going to be that time. And so now periodically I'll go back and listen to it just to hear her voice again.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a really emotional moment for me. So I just want to say happy Mother's Day to her, to my mother, both of my grandmothers. But really good conversation. There's a lot you all had to talk about. So I'll let you go now. So you can fill in any takeaways for you.
Yeah, no, I think that struggle between how you deal with your mother and then how you deal with your kids is something that fascinates me. And I'm going to see a lot of it, of course, this summer while my mom is here living with me.
Don't record your mom and post it online.
No, I won't do that. We're going to bring her in the studio, put her on the show is what our plan is.
Yes.
If she consents, of course.
Yeah, definitely. Sounds good. And congratulations. Good job. You went so long without saying Detroit today.
I know. I broke down and did it today.
All right.
All right. That's going to do it for us on Created Equal. Remember, you can listen to recent episodes of the show at WDET.org, and we would love if you would subscribe to our podcast, where you can leave a rating or a review. Created Equal is produced by Carrie Jr. II and David Lines. Our engineer is Nate Bender. The audio editing is by Connor Anderson, and the music is by Sam Bobian. Created Equal is a production of WDET, a listener-supported service of Wayne State University.